There's a kind of person in this world who often goes unnoticed, not because they're unremarkable, but because they don't demand attention. They walk into a room and they don't try to be the loudest. They don't speak unless there's something worth saying. And even then, they often hesitate, not out of fear, but out of thoughtfulness. These are the introverts, the quiet ones, the thinkers, the listeners, the souls who carry entire universes inside them, but rarely feel the need to put it all on display. And yet, despite their inner depth, despite their emotional intelligence, despite their power of observation and quiet resilience, they are so often misunderstood. We label them as shy, cold, aloof, distant, sometimes even arrogant. But the truth is far more complex and far more beautiful. Introverts don't fear people. They just value meaningful connection. They don't avoid conversation. They avoid empty conversation. They don't isolate themselves out of sadness. They seek solitude to return to their center. But the world doesn't always understand that. In a society that rewards speed, noise, and visibility, the introvert's calm, deliberate nature often gets overlooked. Worse, it gets judged. And when you grow up being told, speak up more, why are you so quiet? Or you need to be more outgoing, you start to believe something's wrong with you. You start to apologize for who you are. This video is here to end that lie. Today on True Stoic Way, we explore what introverts wish the world understood, not just for the sake of validation, but for the sake of clarity, compassion, and growth. If you've ever felt drained in crowded rooms, if you've ever preferred a long walk over a loud party, if your mind feels most alive in silence, this message is for you. And if you're not an introvert, but you love one, live with one, or work with one, then this message is especially for you. Because understanding an introvert isn't about fixing them. It's about appreciating them. It's about seeing the strength in restraint, the courage in stillness, the discipline in silence. Here at True Stoic Way, we honor that kind of strength, not the flashy kind of dumb, but the quiet kind that endures, the kind that doesn't need applause, because it's rooted in self-respect. If you believe that still waters run deep, if you're building a life of calm power, mental clarity, and emotional resilience, subscribe now to True Stoic Way. This space was made for you. Now let's dive into the truth behind the silence. Let's uncover the 7 things introverts wish everyone else knew, but almost never say out loud. Part 1, silence is not emptiness. Silence makes people uncomfortable. In a conversation, even a few seconds of quiet can feel like a void, something to be filled, fixed, or talked over. To many, silence signals awkwardness, social failure, or disconnection. But for the introvert, silence is not a problem. It is a space, a necessary pause between thoughts, a sacred ground where clarity begins. What most people don't realize is this: silence is not emptiness. It's not the absence of thought. It's the presence of thought in its purest form. When an introvert grows quiet, they're not shutting down. They're tuning in. They're processing what was said, not just the words, but the intention behind them. They're weighing their response, considering if it adds value or simply adds noise. They're navigating not just the conversation, but the energy in the room. But to the outside world, this pause often gets misread. Are you okay? Why are you so quiet? Say something. The world is wired for extroversion, where speed, volume, and reaction dominate. So when someone chooses to hold space rather than fill it, they're viewed as disengaged, or worse, as lacking confidence. Yet silence requires a kind of strength, especially in a noisy world. It takes discipline not to speak just to be heard. It takes courage to listen fully before responding. And it takes self-trust to know that your voice doesn't lose value simply because it's not loud. Introverts understand this instinctively. They don't rush to speak just because there's a gap in the air. They're not afraid of silence because they know that within it, there's space to breathe, to feel, to reflect. Some of the most profound moments in life are silent. Think of the pause before a first kiss, the hush of a funeral, the quiet after hearing life-changing news. In those moments, words fail us, and rightly so. Introverts live closer to that space than most. It's where they recharge, reorient, and reconnect with who they are. Yet growing up, many introverts are taught to suppress this gift. They're told their silence is a problem that needs fixing. Teachers call on them to participate more. Parents worry that they're too withdrawn. Friends ask, why don't you talk more? So they learn to pretend. They perform. They fill the space, often with words they don't fully mean, just to make others comfortable. But every time they do, a small part of their authenticity is buried. The truth is, silence isn't passive, it's powerful. And when used with intention, it can carry more weight than the loudest speech. At True Stoic Way, we believe that stillness is not weakness, it's mastery. That a man who can sit quietly with himself is a man who's not afraid of his thoughts. He doesn't need constant noise to drown out his insecurities. He doesn't need to prove his worth through volume. He knows who he is, and that's enough. So the next time you encounter silence in someone, especially someone you love, don't rush to fill it, lean into it. It might just be the most honest space between two people. And if you're the one who craves silence, don't apologize for it. It's not emptiness, it's your clarity, your anchor, your strength. Part 2, they're observing everything. Have you ever walked into a room and instantly felt something was off, even if no one said a word? Have you ever noticed the slight change in someone's tone, or the way their eyes shifted when the topic changed? If so, you might be an introvert, because here's something the world rarely sees. Introverts are always watching, not in a judgmental way, but in a quiet, almost invisible way that picks up everything beneath the surface. They may not say much, but they notice everything. While others are busy talking, reacting, filling space with sound, the introvert is observing. They're studying facial expressions, tone of voice, body language. They notice when your smile doesn't reach your eyes. They sense the tension between two people who pretend to get along. They hear what you didn't say just as clearly as what you did. And it's not because they're trying to be detectives, it's just how they're wired. Where some people gather energy from talking, introverts gather clarity from observing. And that clarity becomes one of their greatest strengths. Have you ever had someone tell you, I knew something was wrong before you said anything? That's likely an introvert in your life. They read the room before the room knows it's speaking. But here's the irony. Even though introverts are incredibly perceptive, they're often overlooked because they're not the ones pushing to be heard. They're not jumping into every conversation. They're not interrupting or competing for attention. So people assume they're not paying attention at all. Nothing could be further from the truth. Introverts crave meaning. They don't listen just to reply, they listen to understand, to connect dots, to sense patterns, to get to the heart of things. This is why so many introverts make great writers, therapists, strategists, artists, and advisors. They see what others miss. They catch what's in between the lines. If you're watching this and you've always felt like you just know when something's wrong, even when people are smiling, that's not weird. That's awareness. It's a gift. But here's the challenge, because introverts pick up on so much, they also carry more than they show. They absorb tension. They sense unspoken expectations. They feel when the mood shifts. And sometimes it drains them before they even realize why. That's why crowded spaces, long meetings, or surface-level chatter can feel exhausting. It's not just the talking, it's the input. Too much data, too much noise, too many emotional signals firing at once. So they retreat, they withdraw. Not because they're weak, but because they need space to process what the rest of the world didn't even notice. If you're someone who loves an introvert, remember this. Their silence isn't distance, it's often respect. They're taking in more than you know. Give them time, and when they do speak, they'll say something that actually matters. And if you are an introvert, don't doubt the value of what you see. The world may overlook your insight, but don't you dare do the same. What you see, what you sense, what you understand without words, that's your strength. That's your edge. Here at True Stoic Way, we honor the power of perception. Not all wisdom is loud, not all clarity comes with volume. Some of the deepest truths are spoken in silence and seen by those who simply know how to look. Part 3, socializing costs energy. Let's talk about something most people don't understand. Socializing is exhausting for introverts. Not because they dislike people, and not because they're antisocial, but because every interaction, even a good one, costs energy. Have you ever left a gathering, even with friends you like, and felt completely drained afterward? Not sad, not unhappy, just worn out. If that resonates with you, then you already know the truth. Being around people, especially in groups, pulls energy from you. For extroverts, socializing is like plugging into a power source. The more people, the more stimulation, the more excitement, the more alive they feel. But for introverts, it's the opposite. Each conversation, each noise, each facial expression to interpret, each smile to maintain, it adds up. And when that battery runs low, you start to shut down. Not out of rudeness, not because you don't care, but because your system needs to reset. This is where misunderstandings often happen. Someone says, "Why did you leave early? Why are you being distant? Why don't you join us more often?" And you don't always have the words to explain it. Because how do you tell someone, "I enjoy your company, but my brain is full and I need silence now"? It sounds dramatic, but it's real. Social fatigue is like emotional dehydration. You've poured out so much attention, focus, and presence that you need to step away just to feel like yourself again. And that's not weakness, that's self-awareness. See, introverts aren't avoiding people. They're avoiding the cost of overstimulation. They're protecting their energy so they can show up fully when it matters most. And here's something important. Introverts often love people deeply. In fact, many of them are incredibly loyal, compassionate, and generous in relationships. But they're selective with their time and space. Because when they give fully, not halfway, not fake smiles, not forced laughter. They're either present or they're recharging. If you're someone who finds parties, networking events, or small talk exhausting, you don't need to feel guilty about it. That's not you being antisocial. That's you being in tune with your mental and emotional boundaries. One of the most stoic things a person can do is recognize when their energy is low and choose to step back rather than push forward just to please others. Because presence without authenticity is just performance. And introverts, true introverts, don't perform. They connect, they go deep. They want to talk about things that matter, not just what's trending. So if you've ever wondered why you felt like leaving the room even when nothing went wrong, there's your answer. Your mind and heart were telling you, we need space, we need quiet. And that's okay. At True Stoic Way, we believe honoring your limits is a form of strength. Not all battles are fought with swords. Some are fought with choices. The choice to say, I've given enough for today, now I return to myself. So protect your peace, guard your energy, and remember, you don't have to explain your boundaries to everyone, but you do have to respect them yourself. Part 4, deep over small. There's a certain kind of conversation that drains introverts faster than anything else. It's not conflict, it's not confrontation, it's small talk. How's the weather? Busy week? Seen any good shows lately? It's not that these questions are rude or wrong, they just don't mean anything. To an introvert, words are not background noise, they're energy. And spending energy on shallow exchanges feels like watering plastic plants. Have you ever found yourself zoning out halfway through a surface-level conversation, wondering how many more times you have to say, yeah, totally, before you can quietly leave? It's not because you're antisocial. It's because your mind craves substance. Introverts don't want more conversations. They want real ones, the kind of talk that stretches past the surface, the kind that makes you lose track of time, the kind where someone says, I've never told anyone this before, and they mean it. That's where introverts come alive. Ask them what they're afraid of. Ask them what book changed the way they think. Ask them how they see the world, and you'll meet a different person entirely. But ask them what they did last weekend, and you'll probably get a polite nod and a slow fade out. It's not arrogance, it's alignment. Introverts value depth because that's where they live. They've spent years in their own heads, thinking, reflecting, replaying, reimagining. They're not afraid of the quiet because they've already had the hard conversations with themselves. So when someone is willing to go deep, to get real, to be vulnerable, that feels like home. This is why introverts are often the friend you call at 2 a.m. when you're falling apart. They may not always be the loudest in the group, but when it matters most, they show up with a kind of presence that doesn't need volume. If you're watching this and you've ever been called too intense, too serious, or too deep for this, just know that's not a flaw, it's a filter. Not everyone is ready for depth, and that's okay. But that doesn't mean you should stop offering it. See, in a world full of noise, depth is rare, and what's rare is valuable. So if you're an introvert who feels out of place in lighthearted chatter, don't force it. Don't shrink yourself to fit in where you don't feel seen. Instead, find those 1 or 2 people who meet you below the surface. The ones who speak in layers. The ones who don't rush to reply because they're really listening. At True Stoic Way, we believe that words should mean something. We believe in conversations that change you, not just entertain you. And if that's how you're wired, you're not alone. In fact, that depth you carry, that's not just personality, that's purpose. So keep going deep, even if the world keeps staying shallow. Part 5, alone not equal to lonely. There's a moment many introverts know well. When the noise fades, the door closes behind them, and the world finally goes quiet. And in that quiet, they feel whole again. It's not sadness, it's not escape, it's not isolation, it's restoration. But here's the problem. The world doesn't always understand the difference between being alone and being lonely. So when an introvert chooses solitude, people start to worry. Are you okay? Why don't you come out more? Don't you get lonely? The truth? No, not really. Not in the way most people think. You see, loneliness is the pain of not having people around when you want connection. Solitude, on the other hand, is the power of being alone when you choose it. And for introverts, solitude isn't a punishment. It's a requirement. It's how they process the world, how they recharge their emotional batteries, how they hear their own thoughts again after too many conversations. If you're an introvert, you know the feeling. That sigh of relief when you cancel a plan and suddenly feel alive again. That comfort of walking alone in the evening. No one to entertain, no small talk to perform. Just space, just breath, just you. And maybe for a long time you felt guilty about it. Like wanting to be alone made you cold, or selfish, or difficult. But here's the truth. Time alone doesn't mean you don't care about others. It means you care enough to show up fully. And you can't do that unless you've recharged first. This is where many people misunderstand introverts. They think pulling back means pushing away. That time alone is rejection. But for an introvert, time alone is returning to center. It's realignment. It's remembering who they are when no one else is watching. Some of the wisest people in history knew the power of solitude. Marcus Aurelius wrote his deepest thoughts alone in his journal. Seneca found peace not in the Senate, but in his study. Even the Stoics, men of action, understood the need for retreat, because in solitude, truth surfaces, noise fades, and what matters most rises. So if you're someone who needs space, who chooses silence over stimulation, don't let the world make you feel broken for it. You're not avoiding life. You're honoring your rhythm. At True Stoic Way, we believe time alone isn't empty. It's full of reflection, clarity, and inner strength. We believe that a man who can sit in silence, without distraction, without validation, without applause, is a man who knows himself, and that kind of man is rare. So whether you're walking alone, thinking alone, or just sitting quietly after a long day, don't mistake that solitude for loneliness. It's not a void, it's your sanctuary. And when you return from it, you'll bring something deeper back with you, yourself. Part 6, they're loyal, but you need to earn it. Introverts don't open up easily. They're not the kind of people who tell their life story over coffee with someone they just met. They don't click instantly. They don't rush trust. And some people mistake that for being cold, or guarded, or disinterested. But what they don't see is that behind that quiet exterior is someone who takes connection very seriously. Because for the introvert, relationship is sacred. It's not about how many people they know, it's about how deeply they know the few they let in. If you've ever been close to an introvert, you know it's not easy to earn their trust. They watch, they wait, they test quietly without you even realizing. Not to judge you, but to see if you're safe, consistent, genuine. And once you prove that you are, once you show them that your presence isn't just surface level, something powerful happens. They let you in. And when they do, you'll discover one of the most loyal, deeply committed types of people you'll ever meet. Because introverts don't love lightly. They don't have care. They don't maintain friendships out of convenience. If they're still in your life, it's because they chose to be there. Not for noise, not for status, but for connection. This loyalty runs deep. It doesn't always show up in grand gestures, but it's there in the quiet things. The way they remember details you forgot you shared. The message they send when you've gone quiet too long. The steady presence when life falls apart. No drama, just there. But here's what people often miss. This loyalty must be earned. Introverts don't give themselves to just anyone. They've spent years learning to protect their emotional world. They've been misunderstood too many times, overlooked, or told they're too much or too quiet. So now they guard their energy, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. If you're lucky enough to be loved by an introvert, whether as a partner, a friend, or even a sibling, know that you're not just part of their circle. You're part of their inner circle, and that means something. But it also comes with a responsibility. Be honest, be consistent, be real. Because the moment you break that trust, you may not get it back. Not because they're spiteful, but because once the safety is gone, the connection no longer feels like home. And they'd rather be alone than in something false. At True Stoic Way, we believe that loyalty is not about loud promises. It's about quiet commitment, about showing up when it matters and standing firm even when no one's watching. That's the introvert's way. So if you are an introvert, don't apologize for being slow to trust. Don't let the world rush your process. The depth you bring into relationships is rare, and the people who value it will wait for it. And if you love someone who's wired this way, don't push them to open up. Just be steady, be safe, and in time they'll bring you into a world most people never get to see. And once you're there, you'll understand why it was worth the wait. Part 7, the quiet strength of introverts. Strength doesn't always look like we think it should. It's not always the loudest voice in the room, not always the most confident handshake or the most visible success. Sometimes, strength is quiet, unseen, and completely unshakable. You see, introverts carry a kind of power the world rarely recognizes because it doesn't demand attention. It doesn't need applause. While others chase validation, the introvert quietly builds. While others speak to be heard, the introvert waits until they have something worth saying. And when they do speak, people listen, because that's the paradox. The quieter they are, the more weight their words carry. This is the strength of restraint, the strength of self-awareness, the strength of someone who doesn't react to everything because they've learned to respond instead. Introverts are often seen as reserved, but make no mistake, they are resolute. They're not trying to impress anyone. They're not playing a role. They're anchored in who they are, and they don't need the noise of the crowd to feel real. That's rare, and that's powerful. Have you ever met someone who simply feels solid? Someone who doesn't talk over others, doesn't rush to prove their point, doesn't brag about their wins, but when they do speak, it hits you in the chest? That's the introvert, and it's not an act. It's the result of time spent in silence, time spent thinking, reflecting, refining. While the world was distracted, they were becoming. That's the quiet strength most people miss. And if you're an introvert watching this, don't let anyone convince you that your stillness is weakness. It's not. You don't need to be louder. You don't need to force yourself into more rooms, more crowds, more conversations just to prove you belong. You already belong exactly as you are, because in a world obsessed with more, you are the reminder that less can be deeper. That silence can be full of meaning. That presence doesn't have to be loud to be felt. And if you've ever felt out of place, like the world was too fast, too noisy, too shallow, it's not because you're broken, It's because your soul was built for depth, and the world needs that now more than ever. Here at True Stoic Way, we believe the strongest men aren't always the ones who shout. Sometimes they're the ones who listen, who pause, who hold back. Not out of fear, but out of control. That's real power. That's the power of introverts. So whether you speak up or stay quiet, whether your circle is wide or just a chosen few, stand tall in your truth. The world may not always understand you, but it needs you. And if this message resonated with you, hit the like button, subscribe to True Stoic Way, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because quiet doesn't mean weak. It means focused. It means intentional. It means stronger than you think. In a world that rewards noise, your quiet is not a flaw. It's a form of strength. You don't have to explain your silence. You don't have to justify your need for space, depth, or solitude. You just have to honor it. Because when you do, you stop apologizing for who you are and start living as you were meant to be. If this message spoke to something in you, don't just keep it to yourself. Subscribe to True Stoic Way, where quiet minds grow strong and still souls find their voice. You are not alone. You are not too quiet. You are exactly enough.